Hello? LC, this is Don Gale with the State Bureau of Investigation. I'm going to tell you something, Don Gale.
0 to 60 in 2 seconds.
Yeah.
You're going to quit spreading these lies and rumors that you've been spreading around about me. I'm tired of it and I ain't taking it no more, Don.
My name is Sherry Wilson. This is Outline of a Murder, the Smart True Crime Podcast.
Hi, I'm Elena.
And I'm Mom.
So this is our very first podcast ever. And I want to share the story of how, this all came to pass, I guess you would say. Because probably, I think it was a year ago, I called you after the gym and said, hey, I want to do a true crime podcast. And my original idea was cruises, like crimes on cruises, remember?
Yes, I do.
And goodness, a little exuberant there. And so I immediately start, digging, and it's really hard to find information on cruise murders, because there's so many factors involved. And I'm like, no, that's not going to work. And so I was brainstorming. Well, anyway, I have to tell you, Elena, I had no idea you liked true crime as much. And so when I mentioned to you the idea, it was maybe not as much.
Yeah, not as much as y'all.
Right.
Y'all live and breathe the murder.
Yes.
I do like it, though.
So when I mentioned it to you, you're like, oh, that would be so much fun. So here we are, 2 daughters and a mom doing a true crime podcast. And of course, you're our mom, not a mom. Like I didn't pick you up off the street.
Good to know.
Just in case you're wondering.
And but then it was like, okay, what? I don't want it to be like any true crime podcast. I want it to have a function. I want it to have a purpose. I want it to help people. And so this true crime, case that we're going to talk about today actually kickstarted it. And I was watching a show, Dead of Winter, season 2, episode 2, called Cold Blue. And I don't want to go into all the story because obviously we're going to go through it. But what fascinated me in the story is how this lady could not fathom the killer to be the killer and why, which we'll get into. And all of a sudden it hit me, why not do a true crime on the personality aspect, the psychology, break down the crime and figure out, okay, why did this lady stay with him, or why did this man stay with her, or how can you protect yourself and keep yourself safe, because there's people that are very trusting out there. And so once I saw that and passed on to you guys, we knew that's the direction we would go. And I think you especially liked that idea, Elena, because it's like, let's help people in the process.
Yeah. And you're really good at personalities and such too.
Yeah.
So I figured it'd be interesting.
Yeah. So I'm excited. So we're going to tell the story, but also, like I said, break it down. Now, of course, none of us, sitting here are obviously psychiatrists, psychologists, nor law enforcement. But just, being true crime, I think my very first true crime book I read was when I was 14, 15 years old. I remember going on the road with Dad, and I would read true crime, and then we'd discuss it, which is very interesting, discussing true crime in the middle of the night in a semi-truck, It's a little bit creepy.
Which one stood out to you?
Bundy. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And there's another one I'd like to get into maybe in season 2, and that's Ramirez, the killer over in California.
Yes.
Yeah, I want to get into him because I've never really studied his story. But Bundy is fascinating to me, which we're going to have at part 1 and 2 on him later in the season. But we are true crime, I guess you would call us students. And so, I don't want to put any professional advice or anything out there like that. But I think we can break it down and kind of discuss how people find themselves in situations. Mm-hmm. So let's go ahead and dive in. So our story begins in the winter of 1993 in Salisbury, I'm not sure how you pronounce it, North Carolina, located in the Blue Ridge Mountains. Have y'all ever been there?
No, I
Oh,
haven't.
it's beautiful. And Kay Weden, she's a school teacher, and her new boyfriend of about 6 weeks, his name was Vicktor Gunnison, and he was a handsome Swede. And they had just finished their date, and they were discussing their plans for the morning. Now it's in the dead of winter, and it was a little bit before Christmas, and so they had made plans. The next morning they were going to get together with her, I believe, son, and then go look for Christmas trees.
How did she meet him?
I'm not sure how she met him, but I do know that right off the bat there were sparks. Like they liked each other, and it was moving pretty fast. I think at this point they'd only been dating maybe 5 or 6 weeks. And they kissed each other goodnight. He left. And then the next morning she kept waiting for him, and she didn't hear from him. And she's like, you could tell like from the show, when I first watched it, she thought maybe she had done something wrong, or maybe he had changed his mind. Like it never entered her mind something was wrong. She just thought, gosh, did we have a fight, and I missed it. So she tried calling him several times. There was no answer. And she spent the next 4 to 5 days calling him. And she was baffled. She couldn't figure out what was going on.
Police.
No, because again, they'd only known each other like 5 or 6 weeks. Yeah. And I think I probably would have maybe thought the same thing.
Yeah.
Maybe I made him mad. But I do think that maybe after a day or two, I would start wondering if he was okay. I mean, what do you all think?
Too. I would
probably
too.
have just taken it as rejection.
Well,
Okay.
true.
Yeah. Yeah, me, I'd be like, well, probably because we do watch so much true crime.
Yeah.
I'd be like, so something's wrong here. And so she could never get a hold of him. It was a mystery to her, and she was pretty sad about it. She thought, I really liked him, and I guess it didn't work out. Well, the next morning not the next morning, but a few days later, she had gone to work. It was December 9th, and she got a call from her mother's boss, Mr. Paul Brown, and a coworker. And the coworker was a friend of her mother's. And they came to get her because they could not get a hold of her mom. And her mom did not show up to work. And she was worried because her mother was very faithful to show up to work or to call if she wasn't feeling well. So they all knew something was wrong. Something's wrong. And of course, I'm sure she thought maybe she fell or, maybe had a heart attack, something like that. So there's no way her mother wouldn't be at work, and she would have called in. So the sheriff's office already had some officers waiting for her. And so they get her to the house because they couldn't get in. They didn't have a key. So they come and get her. The officers are waiting at her mom's house for her to come up with the key.
And who called the officers?
The coworker and her boss. And she didn't have a key with her, so they had to take her to her house, which was just blocks away. She gets the key, and she also, on the way, when she went into the house to get her key, she called her ex-boyfriend, Elsie Underwood, because he was a cop. And she called and said, hey, something's going on here. And he's like, okay, well, let me know. No, she left a message and said, hey, something's wrong with my mom. And then she got in the car with the cop, and they went down to her mother's house.
Was it her ex-boyfriend or the mom's ex-boyfriend?
Sorry, it was Kay's, the daughter.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And so she walked to the door that went directly into the kitchen, and she noticed that the storm door wasn't locked. And her mother always kept it locked. And even for a stranger, or a person she knew, she'd open it, but for a stranger, she'd keep it locked and talk to him through the screen. So I don't know if the deputies went in first. I'm sure they did, because that's probably a protocol if they're doing a wellness check, I'm not sure who went in first, but they did, and I hope she did not go in first and see her mom. Because when the deputies went in, they found 77-year-old Catherine Miller shot in the head twice, execution style. And at first it looked like a robbery, so things were knocked off the table, drawers were open, but 2 things stood out to the investigators right off the bat. Number 1, she'd never opened the door to a stranger, ever. Like even if they tried to convince her, she wouldn't have done that. Number 2, her valuable things weren't stolen. Which to me is weird. Like if you're there to kill someone and you're trying to make it look like a crime, why the heck don't you take valuable things? It's like crime 101, wouldn't you think?
They're not of sound mind, though, at that point. They're not thinking rationally, unless it's way premeditated.
That's true. That's true. It's just you see it all the time on crime shows.
Or someone could have spooked them off.
Yeah. Yeah. That's true. I just find it interesting that it's like all the time cops can tell that it wasn't, the motive was not the burglary because they don't take valuable things.
Yeah.
But the ones where they actually do, even though that wasn't the motive, it takes them a while to figure it out. So it probably is they're nervous or they got spooked and they just didn't take the valuable
But she
stuff.
didn't see her mother like that.
I hope not. I don't know. It didn't tell in the show, like who went in first. I'm assuming protocol would be police. Mm-hmm. So they believe the scene was staged and her killing almost seemed like a hit, so there was no struggle, just 2 shots in the head and she was slumped against the kitchen wall by her stove. And so then they're like, okay, what on earth could be the motive? Because as you can see, this is her on the screen. This is her and her daughter, Kay. So Kay's the one that opened the door for the police. And so this is probably closer to her age. I mean, you can see she just seems like a strong lady. Like you could tell by her features. She looks like a strong lady, but also a sweetheart. Mm-hmm. I mean, just a smile.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so no enemies. I mean, they just could not figure out who on earth would want to kill a 77-year-old execution style.
No sign of struggle at all.
None.
And it was the front, not the back.
Yeah. Front, right. I mean, just, and then a headshot.
2 times.
Yeah. And that's not easy.
Right.
So, and I don't.
I mean, not that we know.
Right.
Well, me and you do shoot, and it's not easy to get a headshot,
Yeah.
So, anyway, now, police immediately, of course, question Kay because not that she was a suspect, but they're like, okay, is there anything weird going on in your mother's life? Does she have any enemies? They're trying to figure out, is there any suspect whatsoever?
I would think everyone's a suspect at that point.
Right.
Even
Including her son, who was a teenager at the time. But her mother didn't have any enemies. And what is weird, though, is Kay and her son, Jason, had been getting threatening letters. So she was getting anonymous letters, and the detective, the head detective, Dan Gale, said they were threatening in nature, they were eerie, and they were scary, the
How long
letters.
were they getting those?
I don't know. I don't think it said. And then on top of that, she had no idea why she was getting them. It was like all of a sudden, out of the blue, she starts getting these letters, and she didn't report them or anything. She just thought they were, maybe prank, but she did keep them. She did keep
give them
them
to the police?
Yes.
Why would you not report those, though? Especially if they were eerie, threatening. I would definitely report those.
I would
she
too.
was obviously, she seems to be really naive.
In the show, she was, and she seemed
Trusting,
like,
I should say.
yeah, trusting and naive could be, both words would be fitting. Sweetheart of a lady.
Yeah.
And, people like her don't think suspiciously.
Yeah.
Unlike us. And so, yeah, she thought they were weird. They did unsettle her. But what was even stranger is they were also threatening her son.
Oh, no.
And she's like, who on earth would be threatening me and my son? Like, the son was weird because she was just he was just a teenager. Then things got even weirder.
Did she have an ex-husband?
They didn't say. Now, she did make the phone call to her ex-boyfriend. So, of course, the police are, wondering, okay, who is this ex-boyfriend? What's his role in her life right now? But it didn't say if she had any ex-husbands. But she did have her son, and she was a single mother. So, obviously, there was a father in the picture, but he didn't come into the story at all. So, he probably was eliminated right off the bat. Okay, so things got weird after this even more. So, she's dealing with the death of her mother. And then one night her son Jason was asleep and they heard a loud pow. And he said it sounded like a 2x4 hit the side of the house. And so he sat straight up, he yelled for his mom, and he thought it sounded like a gun. I mean, to him it was a gun. And they called the police. Sure enough, someone had shot through his bedroom wall. and from outside. The bullet went through the wall, inches from his head, and then they found it in his room. I think maybe in a dresser drawer. I can't remember, but they found the bullet. And so when her son was sharing about that happening that night, you could see, like, now he's, probably in his 40s, and he was still impacted by it.
Yeah.
And, here he's got his grandmother's killed, now someone's shooting in his bedroom.
How long
Towards
after?
his head, right.
How
It
long
wasn't
after
long
his
after.
grandmother?
At all. It wasn't long at all. Now, I don't think the show said whether it was weeks or days, but it was not months. It was like pretty soon afterwards. So, of course, the police are like, okay, something's going on here with the family. There's something going on. So, the fear he felt, I can't imagine. So, we've got the mother, the grandma is gone, the letters have been coming, and now her son's being shot at. Well, I did put this in my notes. The police did find the bullet in his sock drawer, but they just left after.
But no suspects at all?
No suspects. Here her son's getting shot at. They didn't help her. They didn't give her suggestions on safety. They just collected the evidence and left.
I wonder if they thought that maybe the son was up to some shenanigans or something.
He was asleep,
Well, no, I mean, like, he was the target. Went after the grandmother, now him. Maybe he had upset someone.
That's true.
And so, I don't know.
It could be because, and then did they even know about her mother's death? It seemed like a small enough town where they would know, but I didn't think about that. Just, like a kid, probably, some other kids messing with them. But to me, that's pretty serious.
Yeah.
And, I love law enforcement, but I was definitely irritated at this point. I'm like, you've got a single mom whose mother has been killed, her son's been shot at, and you don't give her police protection or at least some suggestions.
A possibility, too, would be that son was on drugs. It could have been drug-related.
They might have thought that, but he was not doing drugs at the time, but they could have thought that.
Yeah,
They're not going to
for
take
sure.
his word. Yeah. Okay, so then it gets even more interesting. So this was December. So we have December 9th, her mom is killed. So now we're January 7th, 1994. It's almost a month later.
And no leads.
No leads.
Still no
leads at
leads.
all. Yeah, they
Still
have
no
no
suspects,
idea.
Mom.
No suspects.
Right. Right.
You're wanting that suspect.
Right,
aren't you?
I do.
Now, before I get into the next murder, at this point, Kay is really scared. So she contacts her ex-boyfriend, Elsie, again, and he comes over to her house and, and I think at this point he was no longer a cop, but he came with rubber gloves and tweezers, and he examined the threatening letters. So she either had them back or, the lead investigator, Dan, didn't take them with him. I'm not sure. But anyway, he comes over, he's got the tweezers, he examines the letters himself. He couldn't find anything in them. He's baffled as well as to who could be sending these letters. Now, he did offer to speak to the police on her behalf, to try to get some help, get some protection. Well, then she started getting phone calls. So now, we've got all this that's going on, and then she's getting these phone calls where no one said anything. It was just weird, creepy, deep breathing. And so she's being stalked, at this point. She's being stalked, but she doesn't know what's going on. And don't forget, she still has no idea where Vicktor went.
That's what I was going to ask.
Now, he was an immigrant from Sweden. So, maybe she thought he went back to his own country. I don't know. Which, by the way, in our after show combo, we're going to have an interesting talk about him. So, we'll get into that in a little bit. Okay, so 100 miles away from Salisbury, January 7th, Detective Paula May was radioed to a body discovered on Blue Ridge Parkway. And I have been on Blue Ridge Parkway with my dad. It's gorgeous. It's over by Hendersonville and... is it Anderson? Oh, I can't remember the other name, but it's like this gorgeous place. So on Blue Ridge Parkway, you're like going around and there's these just trees for miles and they look blue. I mean, it's like carpet, like you could walk on them. And I love that area of North Carolina. And so it's a gorgeous place. But anyway, they find this body.
Hidden in a grave?
He was covered in snow because, it's in the middle of winter. And, she gets to the scene. It's a naked body. So he's naked in the middle of nowhere. Snow's covering him. Part of his foot had been chewed off by small animals. So he'd been there for a little bit. And he'd been shot twice.
In the head?
One was the left temple, and then the other was the right side of the neck.
That's weird.
Well, that's what Detective Paula said. She said, that's really weird. And a body in the middle of nowhere that's naked. Like, where's his clothes? How did he get out there? They pretty much knew it was a murder because there was no weapon near him. He obviously wouldn't be shooting himself twice.
Right.
And so back at the department, they found a missing persons report. And they thought it could be their victim, and his name was Vicktor Gunnison.
Oh.
So,
oh, no.
Let me show you a picture of him. This is him right here.
Oh, no.
The mustache that was, yes. And, this is early 90s.
He looks like a friendly fella.
Yeah. Yeah. So, sure enough, it's him.
That's a lot of hair.
Yes, he did have a lot of hair. And,
What, Mom? What?
Did they connect him with the other?
Well, they did, because in the missing persons report, Kay Weden's name comes up as the last person to see him.
Oh.
So now I'm wondering, okay, is she becoming a suspect?
Right.
Her mom dies, and
Her
now her
son.
boyfriend. Yeah. So I don't know if she was a suspect. I'm assuming she probably was, or at least they're going to check her out. But it seems like she must have eventually talked to the police about Vicktor being gone, or maybe the landlord or someone said that she was the last person that Vicktor was with. I'm not sure, but her name is in the report. And he had disappeared, remember, on December 3rd or 4th. The landlord reported him missing December 15th. So now we have Kay as a link. Okay.
The landlord
So there was
did?
like 2 weeks worth of time.
Where he's missing and they can't find him. Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. Oh, I thought that the landlord last saw him on the 15th, reported him.
Reported him.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And somehow it got in the report that Kay was the last person to see him alive. So I don't know if Kay also called the police or if the landlord said talk to his girlfriend.
Yeah.
That was the last time.
And the mom was killed during those 2 weeks.
Mm-hmm. So he disappears. They don't know if it's the 3rd or the 4th because it might have been like midnight, 1 o'clock or something, so it might have been the 4th. And then on the 9th is when they get the call that her mother did not show up to work.
Okay.
And then they discover his body January 7th.
I wonder if the landlord and him were friends.
I don't know.
It's unusual for a landlord
Mm-hmm.
to
Yeah.
report
That's true.
a tenant missing.
That's true. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't even know if our tenant was gone for
No.
2 weeks. So that's a good point. And they said that he was really nice. Vicktor was really, really nice. Yeah. He was suspected as an assassin, though.
What do you mean?
Which we'll get to that. That's a cliffhanger. That's a cliffhanger.
Oh,
We'll get into that
very
later.
excited about that. Did you see her face?
I'm very excited. Hurry up.
Okay, so now we've got 2 detectives, Dan Gale and Paula, and they're now talking. They know that Kay Weden is the link. Mm-hmm. She's the center of this thing with the threatening letters. The threatening letters suggest to them that this is someone that's been intimate with Kay. It's either a friend, it's an ex-husband, ex-boyfriend, it's maybe an ex-friend even. It's someone that she has been close to at some time in the past that's really angry with her. Because it's almost like with these murders, like someone's trying to hurt her as much as they can. They're like trying to eliminate everybody she loves.
Wow, yeah.
So they're thinking, okay, her mother's been shot in the head 2 times. Vicktor has been shot in the head at least once. Probably the neck wound was supposed to be a head wound.
And her son.
And her son was
And the
targeted.
letters.
And
Yeah.
the head.
Yeah. So they decide to team up and see if they can figure out what's going on. And the first thing is, okay, we got to talk to Kay. We got to figure out, what's going on here. And again, she's a sweetheart. When they interviewed her, she's just, to me, she's probably an S personality, the salt of the earth, just helps everybody.
How far did Kay live from where his body was found? Victor's?
Is 100 miles away from Salisbury.
That's where they were supposed to go, wasn't it?
No, they lived in the same town.
Oh, okay.
So he must have been taken there,
And naked.
and naked. Yeah.
Why
You
naked?
would do that to shame someone, wouldn't you? To humiliate them?
I would
Or
think
not
so.
leave any evidence behind,
But they didn't do that with Kay. Unless they had been in our house for multiple times. Sorry.
the mother. Yeah.
Anyway. Oh,
Yeah.
yes. Sorry, the mother.
Yeah, because she was shot in the head. Now that one to me, like now it was, winter, snow, there might have been boot tracks, things like that. I don't know. They didn't get into that. But if you're just walking in to execute someone and walking out and you're wearing maybe gloves or whatever, there's probably not going to be any evidence. But if he was kidnapped and taken 100 miles away and executed, like they don't know at this point, was he executed somewhere else or there? It looked like his body was placed there. That's what they're assuming at this point. Then you wouldn't want fibers. So I'm thinking maybe that's why he didn't have any clothes. If he's taken in his own car, it wouldn't matter. But if he's taken in someone else's car, you would want to strip him down so there's no fibers. So I'm not sure.
True.
Man, that is smart.
Elaborate.
Yeah. So to me,
That's creepy.
it could have been a shame thing that could have played a part, or it was an evidence thing.
Yeah.
So cops sit down with Kay at her kitchen table and they're like, okay, there has to be some enemies. You have to have some enemies somewhere, or maybe a bad breakup. They had to have something. So she said, well, the only recent breakup I've had is with my ex-boyfriend, Elsie Underwood. And, he's been helping her.
With the gloves and the tweezers.
Yeah. And she said it was bad, but he was a cop, so to her, there's no way he could be doing this because he's a cop. And then, he loved her. I mean, he told her that he loved her. And she said, you don't do those things to people you love.
But he disappeared.
Elsie Underwood?
No,
that
the
was
cop.
Victor. Victor
Ex-boyfriend.
disappeared. Elsie Underwood is her ex-boyfriend who was a cop.
Okay.
And so I'm sure you guys are probably figuring out at this point, because when I was watching it, I'm like, it's the cop.
Yeah, the glove and tweezer thing, that was a bit much.
It seemed like Sherlock Holmes.
Right. Right.
Like,
But you
interesting.
Or he
never
didn't
know
touch
in
it,
murder. Odd things could be normal.
you never know who the suspect is, Mom.
Exactly. Exactly.
Well, when I'm watching it, and again, this is what sparked the podcast, because me being the D personality that I am, it took me like not even a second to be like, oh, it's him. It's him. It's the cop. He did it. Lady, you better wise up here. I mean, to me, it's him. And so I immediately think Elsie Underwood, obviously did it. And the cops were like, Elsie Underwood. So Detective Dan, he knew Elsie. And they immediately thought it was him.
Why?
Wow.
Well, they worked I think both of them worked in the same department, and he was a little weird, which we're going to get into in a second. But he didn't like them. You could tell he didn't like them that much when he was talking about it.
The detective didn't like him.
Yeah. But she just dismissed the idea immediately. They're like, well, do you think it could be him? Oh, no. He was a cop. And again, he said he loved me, and you don't do those types of things, so to her, there was just no way. She absolutely dismissed it. There was no way it could be him. So again, I love law enforcement. I love our police, but I don't trust them. I don't trust them at all. My dad, he told me, he said, Lidland, if you ever get arrested, I'm like, yeah, I'm not planning on it.
Right?
Right.
But he said, if you ever get arrested, don't say a word except I want a lawyer. And I'm like, Dad, he's like, seriously, I want a lawyer. Well, he'd know a little bit about that because he's, been in interrogations a couple times.
Right.
So he would know. But I'm like, well, Dad, if you're innocent, he goes, no. He said, it doesn't matter if you're innocent, if you're not innocent, you want a lawyer. And, we've had you've got, people that were wrongly convicted because they believed in their innocence and they trusted police.
Yeah.
But police are human.
Yeah. Yes.
And there's this thing where it's like, if they get you in their focus, it's almost like they're blind.
That's true in a lot of cases.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Not all of them, but a lot.
Yeah. And I could see that. I mean, again, you're dealing with people and you're dealing with people that can have strong opinions. I don't know how many, crime stories I've heard of where you have people, they just knew it was ex-boyfriend. They just knew it was whoever. And then DNA proves they weren't even a suspect at all.
It's true.
And I think their position and their authority makes them even more blind.
Yeah. And I think it would be hard because when you've got circumstantial evidence that's adding up, it seems so convincing at times.
And, I've seen several shows where the police officers get very emotional about the victims and get involved with the families. So you want justice for the families too, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Well, and the individual.
But on some cases, when you request a lawyer, they immediately red flags everywhere.
Yeah.
Well, and I asked Dad about that because I'm like, Dad, if you request a lawyer, they're going to think you're guilty right off the bat. And he said, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. And so to me, it's like my advice, if you're innocent and you ever find yourself in trouble, immediately get a lawyer. And if you're not innocent, you probably want to immediately get a lawyer. But get a lawyer and do not talk. The United States Department of Justice defines stalking as a course of conduct directed at a specific person that would cause a reasonable person to fear for his or her safety or the safety of others or suffer substantial emotional distress. If you are being stalked, go to www.justice.gov/OV as in Victor W/stalking for helpful resources. If you are in immediate danger, call 911. We have more resources on our website at outlineofamurder.com, and the stalking link is in this outlines post. Kay, she describes the breakup, okay? She said that at first everything seemed perfect in the relationship until about a year before the murders. And this is the incident that she was like, okay, he's not the guy for me. So Elsie, Kay, and her son Jason, they were going to go on a trip. And they, especially Jason was super excited about it. And Elsie had washed his car that day. And when they were about to leave, it started snowing. And so Jason was in the back seat and he's like, look, it's snowing. He's excited being a kid. But Elsie flew into a rage. Not he was upset. He was in a rage. And he was like, F this and F that, and it's effing snowing. I just effing washed my car. And he's freaking out. And so then he yelled at Jason. And then he told Kay when she's like, hey, wait a minute. He told her to shut the F up. Yeah.
That'd be a red flag.
That would be
to me.
Over. I'm out.
Well, they didn't even get out of the garage or out of the driveway.
Yeah.
They were like sitting in, And so she said he spewed out such venom that she decided right then she's going to break up. Okay, so obviously he has issues. Well, after the breakup, so she's at a nice restaurant with another gentleman. She was on a date. It wasn't Vicktor. It was a different guy. So they're just enjoying their meal. And Elsie walks in, doesn't say a word, gets a chair, brings it over, sits down and just starts staring at her. And then looks at him. And then just keeps looking at her. Doesn't say a word. And then she's like, what are you doing here? And he's just staring at her. So the man, it's obviously creepy. The stranger, he's like, what's going on here? Who is this guy? And he's just sitting there staring. So her date's like, hey, you need to leave. And he just very calmly turned and looked at him and basically said, you better shut up or I'm going to kill you.
Do we know his whereabouts?
Well, And she even pointed a finger at him.
Wow.
And like now, so again, I'm like thinking, okay, if I was in this situation, what would I be doing? Because first of all, it'd be weird. But with my personality, I'd be like, what the hell are you doing? I mean, it would be like yelling.
Venom.
You know, I would be just nicely sitting there. I'd be like, get the hell out of here. You know, and I'd probably be packing. So it'd be like, you know.
Right.
But, you know, people like her, she's probably like, this is so weird. And then this guy's like, man, what have I walked into here? So then he just kept staring at her a little bit longer, picked up her iced tea and dumped it in her lap.
Wow.
And then walked out.
And she called him a year later for help.
Mm-hmm.
I do know from experience, though, things that people do that are so out of the ordinary, unless you're used to it, you just don't know, and you don't understand, and you freeze.
Yeah. You don't. I mean, I remember the time that the meth head was following me around in Walmart, and I think the only reason, number one, that I noticed him was because my dad taught me, you know, being on the road with him, to always be aware of my surroundings. You know, I'm always looking in my peripheral vision. I am always aware of where I park. I'm always just aware. And sure enough, every aisle I went down, this guy was on that aisle, and that alerted my attention. And so at this point, I'm like, okay, what do I need to do here? Because I know meth users can be very paranoid and aggressive. And so I knew or felt I should not turn around and confront him, but I did stop and I stared at him like, I see you. And so I was hoping that would be enough to get him off of my trail, so to speak. So now I'm at the point where, okay, I'm not going to walk out to my car by myself. You know, obviously he's following me. And so then I go to the self-checkout and I'm trying to alert the man that's there, hey, this guy's following me. And the guy did the weirdest thing. So I'm at the self-checkout and he's on the other side of him, and he calls the worker over and says, oh, I just thought I knew her. You know, something like that. So he's like trying to let the guy know he's not dangerous because he's obviously following me. It was really weird. So then I go over to the door guy. And I said, hey, I'm being followed. And at this point, the guy had walked out in front of me, you know, and so he goes, who? And I said, that guy right there. And he was looking through the doors at me right when I said that guy.
Creepy.
And he said, okay, you don't need to watch your car alone, right? And he said, let me get someone else to help. And I'm like, right. And I'm looking at him like, can you defend me? You know, I'm trying to figure out what's going on here. And so I felt like, you know, in the movies or in those shows where you got the entourage walking, you know,
Right.
It's like slow motion. We're walking out to my car, you know, and he was right by my car.
Oh, no.
He had to have seen you go in.
Yeah.
For him to be by your car.
And so I'm like looking at him, you know, so now I'm mad. Now it's like, okay, I may get hurt. I may not make it home, but now you've really, you know, basically pissed me off. So, you know, let's do this. Let's do whatever we need to do. And, but I kept my calm. They got me in my car, and I, of course, immediately locked my doors, and they watched me drive off. But I think my stance would be more of an aggression. I would be more aggressive. But then even a few weeks before that, it was at night and I was going home and I heard rustling in the bushes and I froze. And then and it was like slow motion, everything slowed down when I turned around and it was a dog. I almost peed my pants. But in that situation, I froze. I'm like,
It does slow down. When you freeze, everything's slow.
Yeah.
And then you can't hear.
So, but here's the thing. You froze on the unknown. You had been trained
to not freeze, to
individuals, like people that are your surroundings in your face.
Yeah. And I don't know what would help that, you know, as far as like the times you do freeze. But it's like everything slows down. And I think it's like your body's getting ready for fight or flight. You know, like everything is all of a sudden intensely focused. Yeah. So I think you're right. If you, you know, someone with her personality, he walks in and he's just staring at her and then he pours tea in her lap. To me, it'd be like, oh, I'd be all over.
Oh, I would.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wouldn't be a trip.
What do you think you would have done?
I'm not sure.
You're a peacemaker, though.
I am a peacemaker, but someone that behaves like that, I don't know. It happened
just
to me
showing
not
off.
long ago and I froze. But other people I can stand up and,
It probably just depends on the situation.
yeah.
Yeah.
And how violent,
Yeah.
Yeah.
how aggressive.
Yeah. You never know. You never know.
You don't know.
But I think some instances my tendency would be like to really fight. And other instances I'd probably, be frozen.
I would have stood up and been very aggressive.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I would have too.
Because I would have known him, though.
Mm-hmm.
True.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, if you know him.
Yeah.
I'm not sure
If he was
I
a
didn't know,
stranger.
yeah.
Right.
You just don't ever know until you're in the situation.
That's true.
What you'll do.
Well, okay, so the producer at this point asked her why she called him and asked for his help after the craziness that he did.
Good question.
And she said the fact that he was a police officer made her trust him and that because he loved her, he couldn't have done those things.
I can see that.
Yes. So, again, this is personality. And so she was an S personality and and Steven's an S. And so they are the salt of the earth. They will help anybody. Depending on their mixture, like if they're an SC or an SI, if they're like an SC like Steven, they can still have some of that distrust. Like they're not going to trust everybody easily, but they will dang sure trust people faster than say a C personality or a D like myself. I don't trust anybody,
Right.
and it's like people are just going to naturally hurt you even if they don't intend to, so it's not like I don't like everybody, which I used to not, but it's more of I don't know you. So, this is my personal space. Don't get in it. I'm not going to open myself up to you, things like that. So with the S personality, she's going to be accepting. She's going to be very humble. People feeling welcomed and a part of something, tactfulness, diplomatic. That's her. She's going to want people to feel loved. And so she's going to have no grid for someone that thinks like him.
I'm pretty trusting, though.
That's
but
your
if
eye.
somebody poured anything on me,
Right. Yes.
I think that'd make me pretty angry.
Well, and you're an ID personality. So, with K, I think she's probably either an SC or an SI. So with your I, you're going to be, friendly. People are going to be able to visit with you, things like that. But if you get mad, your D will come up and you'll handle your business. But again, it has to do with the environment. So in K's world, people, when she hears the word love, she hears acceptance, protection, trust.
And him being a police officer.
Yeah.
I bet that's a big part.
I think it was too. So she wasn't convinced, the detectives were. They pretty much felt like they had their suspect and they needed to look deeper into him.
There's your suspect now.
Yep, here he
What I was
is.
waiting for.
So they do a search warrant, and because the detectives had enough circumstantial evidence to search his home, Detective Paula, it was her jurisdiction, said it was extreme and unbelievable, his house. The guy was crazy. So first, the house was very sterile and cold. There was no warmth, no family photos, nothing. But then it got creepier. She said it was just creepy because in his kitchen cabinets, all the labels of the cans were facing outward, alphabetized, and symmetrical. Like you could take a ruler and measure between the cans and they would have been exact.
Can you imagine if someone messed with those cans?
Oh,
Now,
anger.
just to be the devil's advocate, I like my books color coded.
Yeah.
But that's design
pattern.
style.
That's pattern purposes, I think.
I like mine in alphabetical order.
I just like mine to be in reach. And I have multiple.
Right.
Because I don't know what I want to read.
Well, I'm going to confess here, I do have, like, when I eat M&Ms, I like them to be even.
Yeah.
I don't want to get to just one. And it's like, What the heck? So I do like even, or if we're going to be odd, let's be odd. But if I'm expecting even, I don't like that odd.
Same.
Oh,
Same.
I got nothing.
Okay.
I mean, Dusty and Jade are like that. I have multiple pictures of them grouping colors together as they eat.
I don't even care about the colors.
No, mine
I
has
just
to
want
be
them to
even. Everything has to be even.
Yeah. Like even training with Coach Greg, it's like, no, I can't stop at 13. Sorry, I need to do one more
Right.
swing to get it to 14. But I've been growing as a person. I've been able to stop better. So then she goes to his closet.
I like threes. Now that I think about it, I do like my threes. This is
Okay.
all over the house.
Okay.
We're
Wow.
all alike.
And there
It
is.
is.
Yes. I'll show you. I'll take you around. It's everywhere. You got them there, the living room. I mean, it's
I never noticed this
yes,
before.
threes.
Oh, I'm behind you, Sherry.
And we're 3. That must be
And
perfect.
yes, I'm very happy.
So then they go in the closet. All his shirts were perfectly spaced on the hangers, and then he had rubber bands on the top of his shoes. You know those little tassels on your dress shoes?
Yeah.
So all of his shoes were the same, and he had rubber bands on each one to keep the tassels in place. So then they go to his car. The engine compartment did not have a speck of dust.
Wow.
And this worried them because if he was OCD about his environment, then it was pretty much a guarantee that if he did commit this crime, there would be no evidence whatsoever. So they did find, however, a shoe print on the trunk lid.
Oh,
Yep. So there's a shoe print. They almost missed it.
wow! To look there.
Yeah. So that he missed that when he cleaned the car. So obviously at this point we know who did it. They took the trunk mat for testing. They sent it to forensic testing. In the meantime, Detective Dan's worried because if Elsie Underwood is the one that's doing all of this, then Kay is in danger, and so is the son. And what's stopping him from killing both of them, especially the fact that he knows that they did a search warrant. So he decided to call them, and he wanted to try to get him frazzled to where maybe he would threaten him, and then they could arrest him and get him off the street. So hopefully this plays okay. Let me go ahead and start this, and let's see what he says.
And I tried to prompt him into saying things about what had happened.
Hello? Elsie, this is Don Gale with the State Bureau of Investigation. I'm going to tell you something, Don Gale.
0 to 60 in 2 seconds.
Yeah.
You're going to quit spreading these lies and rumors that you've been spreading around about me. I'm tired of it and I ain't taking it no more, Don.
I knew him before this ever happened,
He
and I
introduced
was the
himself.
enemy all of a sudden.
Wow.
Yeah, so he immediately, and you know, people with OCD, it's like a comfort thing. You know, you're trying to control your circumstances by everything being, in order. And so now his whole world is getting wrecked.
Narcissists try to control also.
Right.
It's like sleeping with the enemy. That whole. I want to see when that movie was made because this really reminds me of that. Like that's how she knew that she had been found. She opened her cabinets and the
Everything was-
canned
I wonder if
goods
it's
were changed.
based off of this, or maybe they heard about this case. It might be. Interesting. Okay, so Detective Paula called what happened next divine intervention. The forensic team was having a rough time finding any evidence to tie him to Vicktor or Catherine's murder. But when they were folding the mat back up to send it back, the lab tech saw some hairs he had missed.
Wow.
So he got the hairs. There were 15 in total, and they belonged to Vicktor.
Oh.
They had them. Now, this is the first case in North Carolina that used mitochondrial DNA as evidence. So I got a quote here that says this is mitochondrial DNA is a small circular chromosome found inside the mitochondria. And there's little organelles, they call them, that's found in the cells. They're called the powerhouse cell of it. And so it's passed exclusively from the mother to the offspring. So they were able to get them. So at this point, they arrest them and they bring them in for an interrogation, and Detective Paula is the one that conducted it.
Arrest him for the murder of
Vicktor. Yeah. Because they couldn't find any evidence for Catherine.
To connect him with
Yeah.
Catherine.
And so they get her in here, and she said it was very unnerving because there was nothing behind his eyes. And he was like a mannequin. He didn't say a word. He just sat there. And so finally, when she confronted him saying that she knows he killed Vicktor, all he said is, well, and that was it. Never confessed, said nothing. So they believe that he probably showed up at Vicktor's apartment in his uniform. Somehow got him in his trunk, took him to a remote area, shot him twice in the head, and left. And this was 3 days after he killed Kay's mother, Catherine. So he was convicted in 1997 of Vicktor's murder, sentenced to life in prison. He was never charged for Catherine's because they could never tie him to it. And he was going to die in prison anyway.
Do they know why he killed Vicktor?
To get back at her, to get back at Kay. And my question is, why did Kay trigger him? You know what I mean? Like, that's why, out of all the people he's dated, why was it Kay where he went off the deep end, you know?
Well, she seems like a sweetheart.
Yeah.
He may not have wanted to lose her.
Maybe. Yeah. So he died in 2018 in prison. And Detective Paula called Kay Christmas Day and let her know that he was dead. Now, what's sad is even though Jason said it wasn't his mom's fault, it was apparent that he felt she contributed to all that happened. It was really sad. That's because when they recorded the Dead of Winter that I just played that clip from, you could tell he was still greatly impacted, and they had not hardly talked since then. So it's like 1997,
really?
yeah,
Wow.
or 1994 when all this happened. So Kay said that she lives with deep regret for the division between her and her son, and I think that's why it's so important to understand personalities. You know, it's just important because Kay's personality is one that believes in the best and the goodness of mankind. And I think that if her son maybe understood how she processes and thinks, it's not like she asked to be that personality style. That's just who she is.
Or maybe there's a little more to it.
Maybe.
I mean, she did end things with him. What else was she to do?
Right.
You don't know.
But then we also are dealing with the fact that he was a teenager and the rest of his childhood was ruined.
Yeah.
You know, it was such a great trauma to go through and the fear he felt. So as a teenager, he's not going to be thinking clearly. And people think that once you're an adult, those things go away. They don't. You still think at that age because that's where the trauma was cemented.
And he might have watched his mother's trauma.
Yeah.
Because of it.
Yeah.
And like development wise, since he had that situation as a teenager, he's still reacting as a teenager to, I mean, I know I did. I know my teenagers did too. They blamed me for things, and it was hard to get out of that mindset until you
process.
Yeah.
And you deal with it.
Yeah.
Now, what's neat is they did start talking. And she's hoping to rebuild that relationship. So this is Elsie Underwood right here. And what stands out to me is he just looks arrogant.
Yeah. But they look similar.
Mm-hmm.
They do.
Yeah. Now,
he destroyed all of her relationships with her son. That's so sad.
He did. And this isn't all of the story to Kay. We're going to go deeper into our after the show combo, which you can check out at outlineofamurder.com. But Vicktor's role in the assassination of Olof Palme, a Swedish prime minister, is very interesting. So if listeners want to hear about that, they're going to have to subscribe to our after the show combo. But the motive, police believe that Underwood killed Vicktor and Catherine to create havoc in her life so she'd go running back to him. Which she did.
She did. She called him.
Yeah. And personally, I believe Kay's rejection of Underwood was probably more than he could handle. You know, he was such a narcissist, he just couldn't handle it. And it makes me wonder if maybe he cut off relationships with people himself before, and maybe she was the first one that ever broke it off with him. Yep. I don't know. Or maybe he never had a girlfriend because he's obviously a freak. Now, he was divorced 3 times before.
What about his family?
It never talked about the family. He did have a history, though, of stalking his ex-wives.
Wow.
So again, it's like, why did she push him over? Maybe he just couldn't handle one more, you know? Maybe he couldn't handle it. Now, I don't like excusing killers, but that's a really good question because I do think it's important to look at possible triggers. And so I did look a little bit into his background. There wasn't much, but he did live in a children's home from the age of 3 until he was 18.
Whoa.
Yeah. So that's probably why he was such a control freak. Can you imagine the chaos, the rejection of no parents, whether they died or gave them away? I don't know.
And you don't own things.
Yeah. Yeah. Nothing's yours. So I think it did contribute. It's not excusing him, but it probably did create, patterns.
And he knows nothing about his parents at all?
And I couldn't find any information. Yeah. And then some reports and court records describe Kay as Underwood's fiance. So that means they were pretty serious. So that if they were engaged and then she broke it off, that would have been even worse. So, but like I said, he died in prison December 23rd, 2018 at the age of 67, never charged with Catherine's.
And he never confessed.
Never confessed.
Anything.
Mm-mm. No, he denied that he did anything until he died.
Really?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Because it's a control thing.
True.
Yeah. So this is a story that kicked it off, because to me it was like, how can Kay call this guy after he dumped tea in her lap and went on that rage over it snowing? And then also some of my research indicated that he was also the night her and Vicktor parted, they saw him drive by.
Oh no.
Yeah.
So that was a year later.
Yeah. A year later.
And I wonder if the dates are similar.
Yeah, maybe triggered. So, anyway.
Some women and men think, though, when someone gets that angry, the tea and the anger, that somehow it's their fault.
Yes. And she didn't talk about that. It didn't seem like she thought that at all. But you're very right. I mean, some women think, well, if I didn't make them mad or if, and I think people also don't recognize the seriousness of that type of behavior. It's amazing how you can have situations where you've got a stalker, whether female or male, and it may start with, angry phone calls, angry texts, key in your car. And most people might dismiss that like, oh, she's crazy or he's crazy. It's no big deal. And then they end up trying to kill somebody or they do. So those are serious things that need to be taken seriously. And if you're a trusting person, don't dismiss those things.
Yeah.
Have a record, have
or
a
red
record.
flags. Don't
Yeah.
ever dismiss red flags.
And trust your gut. If if your gut's telling you something's wrong, trust it.
And if you get threatening letters, give them to the police.
And that's what I mean by have a record. It's like, you've got a record of the threatening letters. You have a record of the police report of being harassed by an ex-boyfriend or girlfriend, creating that record. Mm-hmm. If, God forbid, anything should happen, there's a record.
Yeah.
So those are really important things. And I don't know if it's, again, people, they're afraid maybe they'll sound paranoid, It doesn't matter. Even if cops treat you as it's no big deal, do it anyway.
And you don't want to be wrong. I remember being in a situation very young. It can ruin their lives. If you're wrong.
It can ruin a person's life if you're wrong.
Yeah. So that's the first case.
Okay.
Now, let's transition to a fun topic.
Okay, go ahead.
So,
Mom's ready. So it's like this.
So Sunday, right, is
Taco Day.
Which we only do when the girls are in town.
I guess. I mean, the way
It's
Steven's
true.
been throwing out texts that y'all are having them without us here.
That's not true.
But nobody believes him, so...
Right.
Yeah.
Now, of course, we know how important tacos are to Elena because, like a quarterback,
Whatever.
she, pushed Steven into the refrigerator one time.
That's a true story.
Yes.
It is. I don't believe it.
She
Because
blacked
you
it
don't
out.
remember. You blacked out.
We have a room full of witnesses.
that are all in cahoots.
No,
Yes, that's
I mean, I would remember that. Maybe he
No.
just tripped and then y'all
No.
thought it was
No.
me because
He
y'all
hit-
can't assume.
The wall.
No,
I
supposedly it's a refrigerator.
It's
so
a
you need to pick
refrigerator.
one. Oh, you're going to correct her?
I
oh,
saw
yeah,
it
we're in
with,
cahoots
well,
now,
the
see?
refrigerator's right next to that little wall.
It was like right into the refrigerator. He was like, oh, excuse excuse me. And I think it's because he was going to go to the tacos first. But as soon as
No.
tacos were mentioned, you jumped up, took off like a linebacker, shoved
You
him
did
out of
shove
the
him.
way. He hits the refrigerator.
Knowing him, he was probably going in there to make sure everything was okay, because he never eats before
Right.
everybody
Sometimes
else.
he just doesn't even eat.
But now he knows to stay in the living room.
And he does, and so
And
does
then we
everybody
alert
else.
him.
I know. There's like a whole crowd. I look
Because-
back as I'm getting my tacos, like far in the dining room.
But they're just tacos.
They are
I
not
know.
just tacos, Stephen.
So we're going to take it to a whole new level this Sunday. Who had the idea? Was it you?
I think I had the shirt idea, but Stephen spawned it by the taco
Oh,
plate.
yes. He
the
got
plates.
taco
And it grew
plates.
from there.
And then Elena's like, hey, we need to have taco shirts.
Yeah.
So we each bought or had made taco shirts that are a big surprise. I cannot wait to unveil them Sunday. And I want a picture.
And the husbands and the
Yes.
grandkids. Everybody.
And
has-
great grandbaby.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, we have
Everybody
taco
has taco shirts.
Speaking of great
And nobody
grandbaby,
knows. What?
I'm her best friend.
Oh.
Oh, I told her Aunt Sherry was
Thought you
coming.
had
She goes,
news.
we're friends. And then she got so excited. jumping
So
down.
I'm looking forward to that. But yes, tacos. Do not mess with the tacos. I kind of remember one time when you allowed Dusty to take over the cooking of the
Oh.
shells.
I don't think I allowed.
Yes.
I think
He
Yeah.
never did it again because Elena.
no.
I had to say something.
Now,
I'm pretty
I hope
quiet.
that I've done okay with the taco frying. I try to get yours softer than others, but if, so I will be doing the taco shells this Sunday.
Taco
but-
shirts, good food,
Yeah.
Laughs.
family.
Yes.
What's better than that?
Taylor.
Nothing. All right. Well, I think it's our tag time. So, Elena, you had a panicked face. So this is going to be our tag each time. So,
You need to know.
do we need a sticky note?
I know.
All right. Go ahead.
Be smart.
Be rude.
And don't be a victim. Outline of a Murder is a Mr. Joseph production. What do you think, Joseph? Our greatest source of information for this episode is Dead of Winter, Season 2, Episode 2, Cold Blue. Also, the WataugaDemocrat.com, Court Records, Murderpedia.com, and Forensic Files Now. And also, all of our sound effects are from freesound.org.